The cold winds howled through the cracks in the decimated cities, a constant reminder of humanity's fight for survival. Captain Alina Graves stood at the entrance of what was once a thriving military command center, now reduced to rubble. Only a handful of survivors remained, scattered across the globe, hiding from the relentless advance of the Starborn. The alien coalition, a conglomerate of technologically superior species, had wiped out entire cities, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. Earth's defenses had crumbled under their brutal assault, and what little remained of humanity's military power was now confined to underground bunkers, fighting for every last inch of their planet. Alina clenched her fists, staring at the view of the moonlit sky, where the once blue, peaceful heavens had become an ominous battlefield. Alien ships, far larger and more advanced than anything humanity could conceive, now hung like black shadows above Earth. They were invincible, it seemed, with fleets that could obliterate entire nations with a single blast. Yet, despite everything, Alina refused to believe the fight was over. She had been the leader of Earth's elite forces, a symbol of humanity's strength. But now, she was merely one of the last remnants of a civilization that had been brought to its knees. A small, ragtag group of soldiers and scientists gathered around her, awaiting her orders. They were exhausted, their faces hollowed by the unrelenting war, but their eyes burned with a shared determination, a shared refusal to give up. "Alina," whispered Sergeant Marcus Holt, a trusted ally. "We can't keep running. We need to make a stand. If the Starborn are coming for us, we need to strike first. It's our last chance." Alina turned to him, her eyes tired but filled with the fire of a woman who refused to let her people die without a fight. "I agree, Marcus," she said, her voice steady. "But we don't have the firepower to take them head-on. Our weapons are obsolete. We need something bigger, something they can't anticipate." For weeks, Alina had been scouring the remnants of Earth's military archives, looking for anything that could turn the tide. And then, deep beneath the ground in a forgotten research facility, they had found it. An ancient weapon, hidden away long before the first Starborn invasion. The data was incomplete, cryptic at best, but it offered a faint glimmer of hope. If they could activate it, it might give humanity the power to finally challenge the Starborn, to push them back from Earth's doorstep. The thought of such power both thrilled and terrified Alina. She had no idea how the weapon would work, or if it even would, but it was their only chance. The weapon's blueprints were scattered across several secret locations, and time was running out. The Starborn fleet was already preparing for a final assault, and if humanity didn't act fast, there would be no Earth left to save. "We're not running anymore," Alina said, her voice cutting through the silence. "We're going to fight back. And this time, we're going to win." Her words ignited a spark in the hearts of her soldiers. It wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. It was a battle for humanity's legacy, a fight for their place in the stars. As the team rallied around her, Alina made the decision. The war was not over yet. Humanity would have its rebirth, and it would rise stronger than ever. The underground facility was colder than Alina remembered, the walls lined with rusted machinery and the remnants of a bygone era. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust. As she stepped through the dim corridors, her boots echoed in the silence. She wasn't alone. Marcus, along with a team of engineers and scientists, moved quickly through the abandoned base, their eyes scanning the deteriorating blueprints and broken equipment scattered around. Every step felt like it carried the weight of humanity's last chance. The weapon, whatever it was, had been buried for centuries, hidden, perhaps, even before the first Starborn invasion. Alina had read the reports over and over. The ancient texts referred to it only as Project Genesis, and there was no clear explanation of what it actually did. The scientists had theorized that it was some kind of energy device, one powerful enough to challenge the might of an entire starfaring civilization. But how? And could they even activate it in time? Captain, Dr. Nadia Voss, one of the leading scientists, called from a control panel. Her voice trembled as she typed into the ancient interface. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. The system is still functional, but it's strange, almost like it's waiting for something. Alina walked over, peering over her shoulder at the screen. The interface flickered and hummed, its lights a mix of alien symbols and familiar codes, some of which had long been obsolete. It was clear that whatever this weapon was, it had been designed to function in a completely different era. An era when Earth was still a young, unexplored planet. "What do you mean, waiting?" Alina asked. "I'm not sure," Nadia replied, tapping a series of commands. "It's like it's been dormant, waiting for activation, but not just any activation. It needs a specific sequence, something that only certain individuals could trigger." Alina felt a chill crawl up her spine. Could it be that this weapon was tied to something more than just the technology of the ancient past? Was it connected to humanity's very essence, waiting for the right moment to awaken? She turned to Marcus. "What's the verdict?" she asked. Marcus glanced at the readouts on a nearby terminal. "It's still not clear, but the core power source is intact, and it's stable for now. If we can trigger it, we might have enough energy to make a real impact." His tone was cautious, yet there was a glimmer of hope in his voice. "But we don't know what kind of energy it will release. If we're wrong, it could tear us apart." Nadia joined them, concern etched on her face. "The data suggests the energy field is exponential. We're talking about a force capable of manipulating not just matter, but the very fabric of space-time. If we're talking about the weapon's full power, we could be facing something beyond our control." Alina's mind raced. This was their only shot. They could keep running, continue hiding in bunkers, hoping the Starbound would eventually leave. But that was no way to live. She couldn't let humanity die in silence, in fear. "We activated," Alina said firmly, her voice carrying through the room. "We don't have the luxury of time to debate. The Starbound will be here soon, and we need to be ready. We take the risk. For humanity." The team exchanged wary looks, but they knew she was right. Without action, Earth's fate was sealed. One last gamble. One final push. Nadia looked back at the interface, her fingers hovering above the controls. "It's going to take everything we've got," she said quietly. "Once we start the sequence, there's no turning back." "Then let's do it," Alina replied, her voice hard with resolve. "Let's show the Starbound what humanity is really made of." As the team began the delicate process of initiating the activation, Alina felt her heart race. She knew they were standing on the edge of something monumental, either the beginning of the end or a new hope for all of humanity. The machine hummed to life. The walls seemed to vibrate with energy, and for a moment, it felt as though the sky above Earth had changed overnight. What had once been a serene blue expanse, dotted with stars, was now a battlefield. The Starbound fleet loomed large in the heavens, countless ships, each the size of a city, their dark hulls blocking out the sun. The fleet's approach had been swift, and now, humanity's last line of defense was preparing to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Alina stood on the command deck of the underground bunker, her eyes fixed on the monitors. The Starbound had arrived, and with them, the end of everything. The energy readings were off the charts, tens of thousands of enemy ships, each bristling with weapons capable of reducing cities to dust. Earth had no chance, not without something extraordinary. And that extraordinary thing, she thought grimly, might just be the ancient weapon they'd uncovered. Nadia and her team had been working around the clock, running simulations and trying to learn how to control the weapon. So far, they had made little progress, but they were ready to take the gamble. Time was no longer on their side. Alina knew that as soon as the Starbound made their move, there would be no second chances. "Captain, we've detected their first wave," Marcus reported, breaking Alina's concentration. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency. "They're preparing to strike." Alina nodded, clenching her fists. The resistance forces, barely more than a handful of soldiers scattered across the globe, had no chance against the might of the Starborn. They had already lost most of Earth's cities, and now there would be nothing left but ashes. "We launch everything we have," she ordered. "Every remaining fighter, every missile, every piece of technology we have left. We go down fighting." It was a desperate move. She knew that. Humanity's defenses were outdated, pitiful compared to the Starborn's. But Alina wasn't about to go down without a fight. She couldn't lead her people into hiding any longer. They would make a stand, even if it cost them everything. The first wave of Starborn ships entered the atmosphere with terrifying speed. They descended like locusts, opening fire as they moved. Explosions rocked the ground, sending shockwaves through the military bunkers and the last remaining strongholds of humanity. The ground trembled under the force of each strike. "All units engage," Alina commanded, watching the live feeds of the battle unfold. The resistance forces launched into the skies, their outdated ships clashing with the Starborn's advanced warships. It was a mismatch, but humanity fought with everything they had, against impossible odds. Despite the overwhelming strength of the Starborn, humanity wasn't giving up. Fighter jets screamed through the air, launching missiles that barely scratched the surface of the alien ships. But each small victory, each alien ship brought down, was a reminder that humanity wasn't completely helpless. "We're not done yet," Alina muttered, watching as a lone resistance fighter launched a kamikaze attack on a Starborn destroyer. The explosion lit up the sky, and for a brief moment, the tide seemed to shift. But it was fleeting. The Starborn had numbers, plenty of them, and their technology far surpassed anything humanity could muster. As Alina continued to watch the battle unfold, a message came through from Nadia. "Captain, we're ready. We can activate the weapon, but we need a signal. It's the only shot we have." Alina hesitated. There was no time to waste. If they didn't act now, humanity would be wiped out before they could even make a dent. She turned to Marcus. "Prepare the activation sequence. We're going to need everything we've got." Her heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea how powerful this weapon would be, or if it would even work. But there was no turning back now. If humanity was going to survive, it had to be all or nothing. The Starborn were here, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The sky above Earth was now an inferno. The Starborn fleet, relentless and massive, had pushed their forces down onto the planet's surface. Alien warships filled the sky, their weapons raining destruction on anything in their path. Explosions erupted across every major city, shaking the ground with the fury of 1,000 storms. Humanity's resistance, ragtag as it was, fought valiantly, but the odds were insurmountable. On the ground, the remnants of Earth's military forces, alongside a few brave civilians, clung to their positions. The battle was intense, with only small pockets of human fighters managing to make any impact on the overwhelming Starborn assault. Fighter jets, barely capable of holding their own, weaved in and out of alien ships, launching their missiles in desperate retaliation. But each strike only seemed to be a fleeting victory. Alina stood at the command center of the underground base, her eyes locked onto the holographic battlefield display. She could see the Starborn forces advancing, their sleek, heavily armored ships cutting through the air with deadly precision. Humanity's counterattacks were minimal, their resources and technology meager in comparison to the sheer might of the invaders. But there was still hope. "Captain," Marcus's voice crackled through her earpiece urgent. "We're ready to launch the weapon." Alina's pulse quickened. This was the moment. She had spent countless hours doubting whether the ancient weapon would work, whether it would even be safe. But now, there was no more time for hesitation. The Starborn were close to victory. Earth was on the brink of collapse. The weapon had to be activated. "Do it," Alina ordered, her voice steady, but her heart raced in her chest. "Activate the weapon now." The air in the command center seemed to thrum with a low, vibrating hum as the activation sequence began. The massive energy matrix deep beneath the ground began to stir, its dormant power awakening with terrifying speed. Alina could feel the change in the atmosphere, a shift that reverberated through the very core of the facility. It was like the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Above Earth, the starborn fleet continued their assault, seemingly unstoppable. Yet, in the depths of the facility, the weapon's core hummed louder, its power growing exponentially. Then, with a deafening roar, the weapon activated. A surge of energy shot up from the Earth's surface, a blinding column of light reaching into the sky. It pierced through the atmosphere and into space, rippling across the starborn fleet like a shockwave. The first few enemy ships closest to the pulse were immediately engulfed in a burst of energy, their hulls disintegrating in an instant. It was a sight so surreal that even the seasoned warriors of Earth's resistance could only stare in awe. The starborn fleet faltered, their ships swerving to avoid the oncoming wave of energy. The massive weapon, its full power finally unleashed, had begun to change the rules of the war. Alina's voice broke the stunned silence in the command center. Focus fire on any ships still standing. We've got them on the ropes. It was chaos in the sky, but for the first time, humanity wasn't losing. Alien ships that had once seemed invincible were falling, their shields overloaded by the sheer force of the weapon's power. Starborn warships, once pristine and majestic, were now burning, their forms disintegrating into the void. The tide of battle had shifted. But as the weapon continued to unleash its energy, Alina couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. This wasn't just an attack. It was a force beyond anything they had anticipated. The more energy the weapon released, the more unstable it seemed to become. She could feel it, a tremor in the air, a sense that something far darker was stirring beneath the surface. The battle was not over. Humanity had dealt the first blow, but the price of victory was yet to be fully understood. The ground beneath Alina's feet shook as the weapon continued its relentless barrage, releasing wave after wave of destructive energy. Each pulse sent ripples across the sky, and for the first time since the Starborn arrived, the invaders were retreating. The tide of battle had shifted, but the cost of that victory was becoming clearer with every passing second. Alina stood at the command center, eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield, as the Starborn fleet wavered, their once imposing ships faltering under the weapon's overwhelming power. Explosions lit up the sky, each one marking the fall of another alien vessel. For a brief, hopeful moment, it felt as though humanity might actually win. But then the weapon surged again. The energy column rising from Earth pulsed brighter, more unstable, as if the very fabric of reality were beginning to buckle under its force. "Captain," Marcus's voice was strained, laced with concern. "The readings, they're off the charts. This thing is more powerful than we ever imagined. It's destabilizing the atmosphere. We can't control it." Alina's stomach twisted. She had known the risks of activating such a force, but this was far worse than anything she had anticipated. The weapon, a dormant relic from an ancient age, had no manual or instructions. They were learning as they went, and every step forward felt like treading on fragile ground. "Can we reverse it?" Alina asked, her voice tight with urgency. Nadia's voice came through next, her tone frantic. "We can try, but the systems are already responding in ways we can't predict. If we attempt to shut it down now, we could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction, one that would obliterate everything. Not just the Starborn fleet, but the planet itself." The weight of her words hit Alina like a physical blow. The weapon that was supposed to save humanity might end up being its undoing. She was caught between two impossible choices: risk it all for the chance to wipe out the Starborn, or shut it down and risk giving them the opportunity to recover and finish what they had started. The image on the command screen shifted. The large Starborn ship, one of their massive dreadnoughts, had regained its footing and was charging straight toward the weapon's energy column. It was as if the alien fleet had realized the weapon's true power, and they had decided to strike at its source. "Incoming," Marcus shouted. "That ship is going straight for the weapon's core. Prepare the defenses." Elena barked, already making the decision in her mind. "We can't let them stop the weapon. It's the only thing keeping us alive. If they destroy it..." Her words were cut off as the starborn ship fired a devastating beam of concentrated energy directly at the ground below. The beam cut through the atmosphere, searing a path of destruction as it headed for the facility that housed the weapon's core. It was a direct hit. The blast rocked the command center. Elena's body was thrown to the floor as the facility shuddered under the impact. Sparks flew from the control panels, and alarms blared, signaling the breach in the weapon's core defenses. "Get up. We've got to move," Marcus shouted, pulling her to her feet. "We can't let this thing be destroyed. We've got one shot left." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She could hear the sounds of the enemy fleet regrouping, preparing for another offensive. But the weapon's core was under attack. If they didn't act fast, everything would be lost. "We need to stabilize it, now," Elena said, her voice cold and firm. "We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." With grim determination, the team scrambled to the control room. The weapon was their last hope, but it was also a ticking time bomb. They had to find a way to control it before it destroyed them all. The ground beneath them continued to shake violently as the starborn ship's energy beam tore through the facility. Elena's mind raced. Time was running out, and every passing second pushed them closer to disaster. The weapon's core, which had been their last hope, was now the planet's greatest threat. If they couldn't stabilize it, Earth would be reduced to nothing more than a burning husk, a casualty in a war it had never asked to fight. Elena's team scrambled through the ruined corridors of the facility, navigating the wreckage from the blast. Sparks flew, and the air was thick with the scent of burning metal. Nadia and Marcus were already at the control panel, their faces grim as they frantically typed commands into the interface. "Status?" Elena asked, her voice sharp with urgency. "We're losing power," Nadia responded, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked. "The core's energy is cascading out of control. If we don't shut it down within the next 5 minutes, the entire facility will go critical, and the explosion would be massive." Elena's heart sank. She had known the risks, but now it felt like there was no escape. The weapon they had hoped would save humanity might very well be the thing that destroyed them all. Marcus looked at Elena, his face etched with determination. "We could still try to redirect the power, use it to destroy the starborn fleet. But if we do that, there's no going back. The weapon's energy will overload, and Earth will be done for. We'll be gambling everything." Elena paused, staring at the flickering readouts on the control panel. The decision before her was more than just a choice between survival and destruction. It was the ultimate sacrifice. She could attempt to shut down the weapon, saving the planet but dooming humanity's chance at victory. Or she could risk everything, unleashing the weapon's full power in one final desperate move to annihilate the starborn once and for all. A flash of her fallen comrades flickered in her mind. Soldiers who had died in the fight for Earth's survival, people who had given everything for them. And for every person left standing, Elena knew what she had to do. "We're doing it," Elena said, her voice filled with resolve. "Redirect the power. Full force." Nadia and Marcus exchanged a brief, uncertain look before nodding in agreement. They all knew the consequences. The energy would destabilize the entire planet, but if it worked, it would obliterate the starborn fleet. Earth's final stand would not be in vain. Nadia began typing rapidly, entering the sequence that would send the weapon's energy straight into the starborn fleet. The core's power surged again, brighter and more erratic. The room filled with a deafening hum, and Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. This was it, the point of no return. "We've got less than 2 minutes," Marcus warned, his voice a mixture of fear and awe. Once this is fired, we'll have no control over it. The weapon will consume everything." Alina nodded, her expression steely. "Do it." With a final, urgent press of a button, the weapon activated in full. A beam of unimaginable force shot from the Earth's core, streaking into the sky. The beam split the air, breaking through the atmosphere and hitting the starborn fleet with a raw, primal power that seemed to bend the very laws of physics. Ships, once impervious to humanity's weapons, now buckled under the force. Their shields crackled and ruptured, entire fleets vanishing in blinding flashes of light. Alina watched, breathless, as the weapon's full power tore through the sky. The Starborn had no chance. Their ships crumbled, unable to withstand the torrent of energy that Earth had unleashed. But as the energy continued to surge, Alina knew the price of victory would be steep. The weapon's power couldn't be contained for long. The planet itself was beginning to tremble. "Is it working?" Alina asked, her voice hoarse. Nadia's eyes were wide, glued to the redouts. "Yes, it's destroying their fleet, but the core is collapsing. We need to get out of here. Now." The countdown had already begun. The Earth was dying. The Earth trembled beneath them as the weapon's energy reached its peak, the shockwaves reverberating through the facility like a drumbeat of doom. Alina could hear the walls creaking, the entire structure groaning as if it too was dying. The distant roar of the weapon's power tearing through the sky was deafening, a constant hum that reverberated in her chest. There was no turning back now. "We need to evacuate now," Marcus shouted, his voice urgent. Alina's gaze snapped to the monitors as the last remnants of the Starborn fleet were torn apart. The alien warships, once a terrifying sight, were now nothing more than burning wrecks, scattered across the heavens. The weapon had done what it was meant to do, destroy the invaders. But now, the true cost was beginning to show. The weapon's energy had reached its maximum capacity, and its destructive power was unraveling the very fabric of the planet. The core beneath them was unstable, each pulse of energy shaking the ground more violently. There was no time left to celebrate victory. The weapon had done its job, but in doing so, it had doomed the Earth to collapse in on itself. The countdown was ticking down, and the core was now a ticking time bomb. "Captain," Nadia's voice came through, panic rising in her tone. "The core is critical. We can't stop it. The overload is too massive. If we don't leave, we'll be caught in the explosion. The entire planet will." "I know," Alina interrupted, her voice quiet but resolute. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. The Starborn were gone, but so was Earth. There was no way to undo what had been done. The weapon had shattered the enemy's fleet, but now it was going to shatter the planet itself. "We've won," Alina said slowly, more to herself than to the team. "But at what cost?" Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her out of her reverie. "We can't save the world, but we can save the people left." His eyes were full of urgency. "We have to go. Now." Alina snapped to attention. There was still one last thing to do: get the survivors to safety. Earth was dying, but humanity was not. There were people still out there, scattered across the globe, still fighting for their lives. They had to have a future, even if it meant leaving this world behind. Alina turned to the team. "Get to the evacuation pods. We're leaving." The corridors of the underground base were a maze, and every step felt like an eternity. They sprinted down the halls, past ruined control rooms, and devastated sections of the facility. The weapon had consumed everything, and now all they could do was run. Every second was a gamble. The facility could collapse at any moment, and the pressure of knowing that the planet itself was dying pressed on Alina like a weight she couldn't escape. As they reached the final corridor, Nadia's voice crackled through her comms. "Pods are prepped, Captain. We're ready for takeoff." Alina nodded, her heart in her throat. They had one shot, one chance to escape before the weapon's power consumed everything. With one final look at the crumbling base, she followed her team into the pod. The hatch closed behind them with a sharp hiss. For a moment, there was silence, deafening silence, as they ascended through the crumbling atmosphere. Alina gripped the seat, her knuckles white, as she stared at the destruction unfolding below. Earth was dying, but humanity had a chance. The pod shot through the atmosphere, tearing away from the planet's surface. As they broke free into space, Alina caught a final glimpse of Earth. The once blue world was now a fiery, broken shell, the remnants of the weapon's power scattering across the sky like dying stars. The weapon had given them victory, but it had also sealed Earth's fate. As they soared into the void, Alina took a deep breath. They had survived. But the true fight was only just beginning. The pod drifted silently through space, the vastness of the universe unfolding before them. Outside the viewport, Earth was just a fading blue dot, slowly disappearing into the dark expanse. Alina's chest felt tight, her thoughts a blur of grief and relief. Earth was gone. The place they had called home, where humanity had risen from the ashes of war, where they had taken their first steps into the stars, was now lost. Yet humanity wasn't finished. Not yet. The crew of survivors was huddled together in the small, sterile pod. Nadia, Marcus, and a few of the remaining soldiers sat in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The weight of what had just happened hung over them like a cloud, suffocating. They had won the war, but at an unimaginable cost. They had saved humanity, but they had destroyed the planet they had fought so hard to protect. Alina looked at her team, their faces grim, their eyes hollow. She could see the same weariness in them that she felt. They had given everything, and now they were adrift in the cold, empty void of space, with no home to return to. "Captain," Nadia's voice cut through the silence, her tone steady but strained. "We're receiving a transmission from the fleet. They've made it out of the atmosphere." Alina's heart skipped a beat. The fleet, the last of humanity's ships, had escaped Earth's final moments. There were survivors out there, people who had been left behind, too far from the facility to reach the evacuation pods in time. This was their chance to rebuild. The message could be the first step toward a new beginning. "Put it through," Alina replied, her voice tight. The screen flickered, and a figure appeared, a familiar face. It was Commander Alex Ward, one of the few leaders who had survived the initial wave of the invasion. His face was weathered, but his eyes were filled with hope. "Captain Alina," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "We made it. We've gathered the survivors and are heading to the closest colony ship. The starborn fleet is destroyed, but Earth is gone. We have no way of going back. We need to figure out what comes next, but we're alive." Alina's breath caught in her throat. They had survived. Humanity had survived. Against all odds, against the darkness of space and the annihilation of their home, they were still standing. She swallowed hard, her mind racing, as she tried to grasp the enormity of what this moment meant. "Commander, how many survivors?" Alina asked, her voice hoarse. "Thousands," Alex replied. "Not everyone made it, but we have enough to rebuild. We've established a small fleet, and we're heading for the nearest star system. There are habitable planets nearby. We'll make it, Captain. We'll find a new home." Alina looked at her team, the weight of responsibility settling back into her chest. The fight wasn't over. Earth may have been lost, but humanity had been forged in fire. They had survived the impossible. And now, they would rise again. A new beginning. "We'll join you," Alina said, her voice full of conviction. "We'll rebuild. Earth may be gone, but humanity is still here." As the transmission ended, the pod continued its journey through the stars. The vastness of space stretched out before them, an empty canvas waiting to be filled. Alina gazed out the viewport, a flicker of hope igniting in her heart. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she believed that humanity had a future, and they would fight for it. together.